Hello, welcome to 15 Minutes of Consulting Best Practices. I am delighted to be here, accompanied by Nick Shevelyov. He's the founder and managing partner of vCSO.ai, and he's a cybersecurity expert, and we have him as a guest today. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Maria. Pleasure to be here.
Nick's firm advises boards, executive technology leaders on cybersecurity strategy and digital risk management. And as you can anticipate, today's 15 minutes are focused on cybersecurity. So you have submitted questions for us, that Nick will answer. Right. Everything we will talk about today is cybersecurity related. And starting next week, we will go back to cover broader range of topics around consulting and how to create growth and success for your consulting firm. We'll retain the Q&A format, but we had quite a few questions come in for Nick, unsurprisingly. So Nick, I'm going to put you on the spot with the first question that came in, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So, Jaren, hello. Happy Monday to you all. John, Michael, and LinkedIn user, because we cannot see your name. Jaren, why don't you share the first question that came in? This question is from Dan, Nick. Dan asks, what approaches do you recommend in handling client data for analysis using AI tools to both get the answers you need and protect their interests? So a question of the moment, right? Very timely. They're looking to use AI, to leverage AI, and at the same time, protect client data. Very important concern. What do you think, Nick?
I'll give you some context. Thanks for the question, Dan and Maria. So I'm a cyber focused professional and how to manage risk in the space. I spent 15 years as the CISO for a global publicly traded bank, and we had to build a program around the sensitivity of the data that we manage. In the financial services industry, if you're regulated by the Federal Reserve Bank, they compel you to comply with the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. But since we were a global bank, we had to comply with GDPR and other laws, rules, and regulations. And so the philosophical principle I start with on data is know thyself, know thy data. What is the sensitivity of the data? Where does it lie? How is it protected? What are the threats facing your data? And in this age of AI, the AI LLMs that we're using are as effective as the data that we can feed into them. And so we have to start thinking about, what sort of data is it? How do we classify it? Is it personally identifiable information? Is it health information? Is it financial? Is it intellectual property that is a secret, right? So you have to think through about classification. And then where can you minimize the data that you're feeding into the AI, but still get the outcomes that you are looking for, right? The business of business is business. And technology is there to enable the business to add more value to more customers at ever greater velocity through more and more channels. Think about your cyber risk management approach as protecting to enable those business outcomes. You want to maximize your upside, minimize your downside. I would prefer vendors in the AI space that don't use your data to train their own models, right? Because then they're retaining data that could eventually leak and expose your business and the clients that you serve. Keep your tenants sensitive in nature. There are enterprise models that you can pay for that are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. I would look for vendors that have those types of compliance certifications. ISO 27001 is another one related to that. Understand the workflows that you're using. It's not just the AIs that you're inputting the data into. What are the outflows? And then make sure that you have the right contractual requirements in place through MSAs and DPAs. And so in the broad strokes, get insights out of your data without really submitting the sensitive regulated data that could expose you. Those are some of the things that come to mind as you think about building a data-centric security model that still leverages the benefits of the AIs that we're using today. So I'll pause there because that was hopefully a directional answer, Maria, and then I'll pause and back to you.
And Dan is here. So Dan, let us know, right? What do you think? Nick answer help you. It helped me a ton to understand, what do you actually need? How's the AI tool helping you? And how do you differentiate between one AI vendor and another? And how do you think about it? I would like to try and maybe jump onto the second question that was submitted with this type of thinking already in place for all of us. And thank you, Nick. Very valuable and very, very helpful. Jaren, do you mind sharing, please, the second question that came in? Thank you. This question is from Roger. And Roger says, as a small boutique of 9 people, we know to ensure that everyone has secure logins and our files are securely stored, which our administrator can turn on and off. Thank goodness. Everyone works with laptops that have security software installed. Beyond that, what are the basic cybersecurity investments we need to think of to safeguard ourselves and our clients? Thank you, Nick.
Great question. Thank you, Roger. I think about the right horses for the right courses at the right time. Managing a large global enterprise security program, you have a different approach. You have a people, process, and technology that's bespoke to that model. Running a 9-person or any small business, you want to have a more tailored approach. And so I think about what are the things that we care most about? We talked about the data. We want to make sure that's protected. What are the things we don't want to happen? Losing the data, having a breach, having a ransomware attack. And how do we reduce the likelihood of those loss events, right? And in a very pragmatic fashion it doesn't make sense to build the Fort Knox of cybersecurity for a 9-person company, but it may make sense to make pragmatic investments in identity. Identity is the right people having the right access to the right resources at the right time. So Maria, you'd have an identity with David A. Fields Group, and you'd have access to certain systems, maybe not all systems, maybe some related to your field. And in those systems, they'd have certain data elements, whether it's PII or PHI or financial data. And so that's what you have access to. And what's interesting is in the era of agentic AI, we now have AI agents doing work for us. And we have to start thinking about assigning identities to agents and binding them to human identities for accountability and traceability. So think about identity and access management, and there are plenty of small vendors that tailor to small businesses. And you want to pair the management of the identity when you have joiners, people joining the organization, movers, they're doing different stuff. And so they have to have access to different data sets, and leavers, they leave the organization and you disable them. You think about pairing that with authentication, authorization, and audit, specifically through multi-factor authentication, right? And multi-factor authentication is there's multiple ways of doing it. You can have a token on your phone. It's something that you know, something that you have. In some cases, it's something that you are. It's your biometric authentication. Right. And you want to have multi-factor authentication that's FIDO2 compliant. FIDO2 is an open standard, and it is the safest standard that we have today. Some people like using password managers. Some people don't. A lot of the password managers have been breached. And so when that happens, you have to go reset all your passwords. So think about the identity and the phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. That's step one. Then you think about, how do I have device control? How do I have MDM? How do I encrypt the actual laptops that we're using? You should have full disk encryption. So if you lose the laptop, someone can't just open it up and try and log in and steal data. And you want to have some sort of endpoint detection and remediation. So if you remember the old days, we had antivirus, McAfee, and Symantec. Right. Those systems have been are now that evolved into what we now know as EDR. And there's plenty of EDR vendors out there. Having something that protects the endpoint is very useful. And then auto patching. In most cases, just set your systems to auto update and auto patch, and have a way to have a remote wipe. So you lose the laptop, someone's traveling, they leave it in an airplane, have a remote wipe capability. Next, think about email. Email is still the #1 breach method within organizations. About 80% of breaches have some email element to it. And so, sign up to whatever email protection you have through your service providers. There should be some filtering. You should get some notifications on, here are the emails that we blocked, right? So those are very common. Backups, it sounds mundane, but the #1 thing that'll get you out of trouble when you have a ransomware attack or a data loss event of some sort is your backups. Automated, immutable cloud backups that you can restore and test periodically. So sometimes an organization says, we have backups. And then I'll say, well, when was the last time you tested full recoverability with user acceptance testing? Oh, we've never done that. Okay, go do that first, right? I wrap up with data controls. You should have only access to data that you need to get your job done. You should periodically talk to your team, maybe once a month for 5 minutes at a company meeting. Like, what's how are we doing in terms of email protection? How are we doing in terms of awareness of phishing? Phishing still the #1 attack method, social engineering. And then have some form of logging and insurance. Have cyber insurance for sure. We should all be carrying insurance for our businesses, and have some sort of logging. So if or when something occurs and there's a loss event, you can go back and look and see exactly what happened. So those are the sort of good hygiene best practices for small and medium-sized businesses, whether it's 9 people or 90 people.
And I want to pick on something you mentioned, Nick, that was very interesting. Everything is incredibly valuable, right? But for us that work with clients, where the information of one client should not talk or speak to the information of a different client, and you don't want that information on the front end, on the execution end. Maybe you have different team members, or maybe you don't want the data to even know that the data exists, right? The data of one client. You mentioned that the agent should mirror the access level of the user. So it's important, as we bring AI agents into the work that we do, if I heard you correctly, to say that the agent is configured so that if I don't have access to a different client because there's a firewall, right, and the information is confidential to me because there's some sort of an agreement or that data is isolated, then my agent shouldn't be able to read it either and use it to give me better insights. So it's not giving it to me on the back end at some level, right? And I imagine that's more difficult to do than one would think so. But there are ways.
That's an astute observation, Maria. Today, especially in software development, you've got developers whose productivity is way higher because they're using AI agents. A developer is writing code, but they've got 7 or 8 AI agents also producing code. And it's going into production, and then the security team is saying, well, look, we found vulnerabilities in this data, and the developer might reply, well, I don't know which one of my agents did that. So you need to start binding identities to machine identities to humans that are accountable for the outcome. And you need to be, to your point, assigning the same roles-based access controls to the agents supporting the human so that they don't violate any of the identity and access management principles we talked about earlier. Imagining you're serving competitors, and you've got employees that are working with one competitor and employees working with another. You don't want to allow cross-pollination of access, because that will create lots of different risk for your organization. So great point to call out, Maria.
All right. And with that, we're at time. So here's a commitment we're going to make to those of you who send answers. in writing directly. So thank you for sending your questions. We're going to get that to you. And thank you, Nick, for being so generous with your time, with your answers, and with your knowledge. Of course, Nick wants to connect with you as well, right? And you can connect with him and you can pull more from his knowledge and generosity. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing how to connect with both of us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. So that's one calendar always. And we have one more announcement next week, right, Jaren? There's a live free webinar. We're hosting a free webinar. So if you go to my profile on LinkedIn, you would also see it as an event. If you're interested in attending instant business development skills upgrade webinar next week, next Thursday on October 16th. Look into it. We'd love to have you there. And if not, we'll see you next Monday. Thank you again, Nick. And remember, consulting is about them. It's about our clients. How do we create success for them? How do we help them grow? And also part of that is how do we keep them safe, right? Today. So thank you again, Nick. You've been great. See you all later. Bye.
Pleasure to be here. Bye.